on today's Story Beat.
Depending on what singer that I'm working with, that was the inspiration. I mean, if you're going to play for Barbra Streisand, boy, that's enough of an inspiration ever, or with Billie Holiday. Tony Bennett, to play with guys like Tony, who was so wonderful.
This is Story Beat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. Story Beat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, my guest today, the extraordinarily multi-talented Corky Hale, is widely considered to be the most accomplished jazz harpist in the world. As well, she's an exceptional pianist and singer. Corky has performed at the White House with Tony Bennett, soloed with Barbra Streisand at the Hollywood Bowl and Central Park, with Bjork on her MTV special, and with George Michael at Royal Albert Hall. And she's played and or recorded with no less than Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Peggy Lee, Nat King Cole, June Christy, Anita O'Day, Roberta Flack, Melissa Manchester, Judy Collins, Mel Torme, Chet Baker, Joe Williams, Benny Carter, and numerous others. Corky made her Carnegie Hall debut in 2007 as a pianist with the New York Pops Orchestra and was among the stars at the 2011 Mary Lou Williams Festival at the Kennedy Center. Corky is the only woman to have played for Billie Holiday, and she performs an annual Billie Holiday birthday concert at the Catalina Jazz Club in Hollywood. For more about Corky, please be sure to check out the book, Corky Hale Uncorked, A Life of Music, Marriage, and Making a Difference. Of note, Corky's been married for 50 plus years to the legendary composer Mike Stoller, who, along with his writing partner, Jerry Lieber, created some of the greatest, most popular song hits in music history. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm beyond honored to welcome the brilliant Corky Hale to Story Beat today. Corky, welcome to the show.
Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show. It's an honor. Believe me,
it is. The pleasure and the honor is all mine. Trust me. So let's go back in time just a little bit. Where did your love of music begin? When did you first start thinking about, I want to be a musician, or I want to play?
That's so long ago, but I probably when I was about 5 years old, because I was a child prodigy on the piano. I went to the piano and picked out everything. And I'm from a small farm town in Illinois, on the Illinois-Wisconsin border. And so my parents said, hey, we ought to give the kids some music lessons. And that started. And that's how it started. And I started playing piano. And I was a child prodigy.
So did you sit down and just start playing? Did you?
Yeah, I did. I just sat down and started picking out songs and playing. And
I think most people have no idea what that would be like, because I don't have I've been in the music business for a long time, and I don't understand how you just sat down and started playing. That's amazing.
I don't know, but I did. And that's how I started. And I kept playing and playing.
So for many people think that music is a calling in their life. Was it a calling for you?
A calling?
Well, that is to say, you felt like it was something you just had to do.
No, I don't think it was that strong. I was a spoiled child. I grew up, I'm one of the luckiest people ever in my lifetime. I had wonderful parents, a wonderful upbringing in a small farm town. And I'm so far, I've been a very lucky person. That's
I would say you've certainly had an extraordinary life and an extraordinary career and opportunities all along the way.
You'll notice, I don't know if you notice, I put on a Laker shirt today. My husband and I are big Laker freaks. We're basketball freaks. Well, and I always say there's three things in my life that can I say that on here?
Of course, please do.
The three things in my life: I've never had a baby, I never had sex with another woman, or I've never tried heroin or any hard drugs. Other than that, I've pretty much done a lot of stuff in my life.
You have been there and done that, all except those
Yes,
three.
I have. And I've been very lucky, as I say.
Who were your earliest inspirations and influences musically?
My mother brought home an album from Chicago with a woman playing the piano. Oh, what was her name? And I heard her playing and I said, wow, Mother, I'd like to play the piano like that. She's really great. And of
So-
course, at this particular moment, Hazel Scott, maybe?
Hazel
Could have-
Scott.
I think it was Hazel Scott. Suddenly my memory returned.
So,
Yeah,
so
I think-
your mother was influential in terms of music because she listened to music, and so she influenced you that way.
Yeah, but my mother never cooked a meal in her life. My mother she grew up so poor with her sister that they had to share the same coat in the winter because my mother was so poor. My grandpa, incidentally, came over, I guess, from Poland, and he was afraid that they would say, "What do you do?" That if he didn't have a job, that they would turn him back. So he got to Ellis Island, and they said, what do you do, sir? And he said, a Fendelman. He said, he kept saying Fendel, Fendel, Fendel. And I guess Fendel is a Polish Jewish word for a pot maker. So he kept saying Fendel, Fendel. So they said, okay, your name is Fendelman next. And that was my mother's maiden name, Fendelman.
Wow.
So
It's always amazing to me when we hear histories of people who were assigned names as they came into the country.
Well, that was my mother's maiden name, Fendelman. And she grew up in St. Louis, and they were so poor, as I say, that she and her sister often had to share the same coat in the wintertime. And so this is a wonderful, wonderful story. But the point is, knowing that she grew up so poor and had nothing, my father gave my mother everything that she never had. He gave her lovely furs and jewelry and everything. And it's a wonderful story. I find it very heartwarming.
Well, it sounds like it would be a heartwarming story, especially if you come up from nowhere like that.
Plus the fact that she and my father were very happy and were married also, I think, over 50 years.
Do you believe that having had the examples of your parents with a long lasting marriage has helped you with yours?
Absolutely, because I saw how my father treated my mother and how they got along, and how my mother treated him.
Wow.
Yeah. But my mother worked with my father. That's the whole thing. My mother never cooked a meal in her life. She went to work with my father every day at like 9 a.m. My mother was known as one of the world's greatest saleswomen. You know, my family are in the clothing store business. And so they always, my mother just went in. My mother was the world's greatest saleswoman. If you were a woman and came in and said, I'd like a pink dress, you would walk out, buying maybe a purple dress, because my mother could sell you anything, and everybody loved her. She was wonderful.
Would you say that rubbed off on you some?
Well, not exactly, because I certainly didn't want to be in the clothing business, although I was at one time, opened a clothing store in Hollywood called Corky Hale, which I had, I guess, again, also for publicity, I got some beautiful girls, and I got this well-known comedian, and I had them walk up and down Sunset Boulevard. And of course, that created a lot of publicity, and my store did tremendous business, but I didn't want to be in the clothing business anyway either. I owned a couple restaurants. I owned the clothing store. I've also been in a lot of businesses.
Well, that's why I'm saying your mother seems to have given you that sort of feeling like you could go do those sorts of things.
She was tremendous. Incidentally, I must say, after I dated Mike Stoller for several years and was wildly in love with him and nothing serious was happening, I was living in LA. So I called my mother in New York and I said, Mother, nothing is happening. She said, honey, get the hell away from him. Let's you and I go to Europe. So my mother and I went to Europe together. And because my mother was very stunning, guys really hit on my mother all the time. And we had a fabulous time. So I came back and I thought, oh, he would welcome me. Mike Stoller would say, oh, I missed you. So Mike Stoller was very nice. And anyway, we still didn't get married until sometime after that. But anyway, Mike and I have, been married for 51 years. So it looks like it was working.
That's just an awesome story. I love that story, especially in show business where it's not all that common.
Everybody says you guys are in the music business and you've been together over 51 years. What? Well, he's an unbelievable man. He's wonderful.
Let's talk about the music business, because that's what
absolutely
our listeners will absolutely love hearing how things go for you. What turned you on to jazz, listening to those first early albums?
Okay, well, now, as I said, I grew up in a farm town. So all of a sudden, one day I heard this band called Stan Kenton. And I said, wow, what kind of music is that? That's tremendous. And then I heard Woody Herman. And I said, this is the kind of music that I really like. This is different. So that's what turned me on to music.
And you were a prodigy. And did you go get training anywhere? Did you take lessons?
Well, I took piano lessons, sure, but not that they particularly taught me anything. I also went 5 summers to the famous music camp Interlochen in Michigan. I think I was the youngest kid. I went there when I was 9 years old, and I think I was the youngest kid at Interlochen. And that was great because I got to play, because I play flute and piccolo and cello and all that. So I was in the bands and I'm playing piccolo and flute. I was in the orchestra playing cello, and Interlochen is wonderful for any kid or anybody that ever wants music training. Go to Interlochen in the summer. It's fabulous.
Well, that's very sound advice.
Traverse City, Michigan.
Traverse City, Michigan. Sure.
Right.
So all right. So over the years, aside from doing a lot of performing, which obviously you did a lot of performing, both live and on record, is there anything over the years that you think that you have done to help you develop as a musician, to become a better musician?
That's kind of difficult. No, I think just the experience of being able to play. They say that I'm the only one that has accompanied 5 of the most famous singers of all.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's true. I played for Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Barbra Streisand, Billie Holiday, and who did I leave out? But anyway, and I think just from accompanying them, I think I was meant to be a born accompanist, not a soloist, because I have a feeling for singers, and I really like to accompany singers.
Do you have some idea in your head as to what it is that allows you to accompany singers in such a wonderful way? Do you have an idea of what it is?
No, but just if I listen to a singer that I really love, like, Streisand, oh God, I think she's wonderful. And I loved Tony Bennett and Sinatra. I mean, I loved all the people. About my book, a book came out about me a couple of years ago called
Sure.
Corky Hale Uncorked. Anyway, in that, I purposely said of all the famous singers, there's only one person that I would ever say anything bad about. And I didn't. I waited until he died a couple of years ago before I really came out against him. And but he's the only one that I never, got along accompanying.
But you got along with the greatest of the greats. I mean,
I did. I got along with every great singer, especially Tony Bennett, who I have nothing but wonderful things to say about him.
Let's explore that for half a second. You've worked with these incredible vocalists. I mean, you're like you said, Tony Bennett, Barbra Streisand, Billie Holiday, Frank Sinatra. I mean, Ella Fitzgerald, Peggy Lee, Nat King Cole. I mean, just the names are the legends of the music business. What would you say are the important lessons that you learned from playing with them?
From Frank or just from all the singers?
Any or all. What lessons might you have learned?
To stay out of the way when they are singers. Don't cover up them when they're doing some great lyrics or something. Just be careful and listen very carefully, and and lead them to the right keys and so forth, and right. That's it. I mean, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, I understand it's hard to explain. That's exactly why we're exploring it a little bit, because people have a hard time understanding it. And perhaps, and sometimes it's okay as an artist that you don't know. I mean, artists just do things sometimes because they're capable of it.
I was playing in a nightclub in Florida many, many years ago. And I was accompanied of, this is the only terrible person that I ever worked with.
Okay.
And at the end of the show, he screamed out, any request for request? And someone yelled out, yeah. And nobody knows that song, but my mother used to go, blue heaven and you and I. Was and so somebody yelled out, blue heaven, and nobody ever heard of that, but I knew that. And so this miserable person that I was working with in Florida, that's the only miserable singer that I've ever worked with, who was really terrible. He turned to the audience and said, this kid is new. She doesn't know a lot of songs. And I thought the guys in the band would kill him. Anyway, that's when I called my husband and I said, send me a ticket. I want to come home.
You are fortunate that was your only negative
Very
experience.
much so. No, that's because I led them, if they were going to go into a different key, I always led them into the right key. That was my main thing, was to work with good singers.
And this was mostly playing the harp, yes?
No,
piano.
both. I would say it was both. Yeah,
Both
both.
harp and piano. Do
Yeah.
you have a preference of the two? Is one better, more
Well,
for you?
yeah, the harp is a pain in the you know what. I mean, it's always out of tune, or there's a broken string and so forth. And that's why I have not been playing the harp for several years, and my husband is very, very unhappy about that.
Mm.
So,
But you're still
anyway.
playing the piano, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but not working in clubs. I really am not in the music business as of the moment, because what I can't handle is out here, as you know, people are living in tents. I mean, it's horrible. There's no housing. So now I'm working on housing, getting people housed into some permanent, some kind of housing, so they don't live in the streets. So I'm with no cooking, no bathrooms, no showers, no, that's what I'm.
The world needs more of you.
Well, thank you. I try.
All right. So when I listen to you play, because I've listened to numerous of your, songs that you've recorded and so on, and I've looked at a bunch of YouTube videos of you over time. And what I can tell is that you really love what you're doing when you're doing it. You have an enormous amount of passion. How much does passion feature in the playing of music, making it good?
I can't answer that truthfully, but I will tell you my favorite thing is when I was a guest on Johnny Carson's show.
Mm-hmm.
And who was the band leader?
Well, that was back then. It was either Skitch Henderson or Doc Severinsen.
Doc Severinsen. Yeah, and so Johnny said, "You've always wanted to be a singer too, haven't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Because you're such a great harpist playing for everybody." So he said, "Why don't you go over there with Doc and stand up and then sing?" And I said,
Wow.
"Okay." And I did, and I think that's the best I ever was. Anyway,
you played on that same show with Tony Bennett, didn't you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Tony said, "Honey, go over there and sing if you want to sing." So anyway, that was it. So I sang, and the next day, Helen Keane, who was Bill Evans' manager,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that was the best I ever was on TV that night. She said, "Corky, I got 5 requests from 5 clubs in the country. They all want to book you." And I said, "Well, I mean, I would like to do that, but I just met this guy that I'm dating. I really like him a lot, and I don't want to leave town just yet." His name is Mike Stoller, but I do have to tell you about that too, because when I moved from LA to New York, Sheila Sullivan, a singer actress, said, "Honey, stay here till you get a place to, till you find." So, and she said, "Wait a minute, you're in the music business." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, you ought to go over to the offices of Lieber and Stoller." I said, "Who the hell are they?" Anyway, but then it's another wonderfully romantic story, because I went over to the offices of Lieber and Stoller, and I was introduced to this guy, Mike Stoller, who said, "Wow, I've had your album of you playing harp for 11 years. He said, I can't believe I'm finally meeting you in person."
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. And I've now been married to him for over 50 years. So
well, that sounds like success to me.
Right. Isn't it romantic? Anyway.
Obviously, this show is about you, but you've brought Mike up, and I'm just curious. Tell the listeners a few of his great hits. Hound Dog.
He wrote little hits like Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, Kansas City. You can't imagine what happened when they invited us, when the Missouri State Senator, lovely guy, or the mayor of Kansas City. Anyway, they invited us to Kansas City, and they treated him like he was the biggest rock star that ever came to town. It was wonderful. Well, and so the point is, he's a very low key guy. He's not a big shot or anything. And what you don't know about us, we're both pretty cheap. We never shop. We never, ever shop. I wear the oldest clothes. I'm a joke of all my girlfriends. I wear the oldest clothes. And of course, my family was quite famous because they had clothing stores all over the country. But I wear my mother's old clothes and what have you. We're not into that sort of thing.
All right. So let's talk about music again, because I really am fascinated by how you do this. You've obviously been playing your whole life. I mean, it's something you did since
I was a child. Yes,
you were a child. Were you into practicing? Were you a practicing person?
Practicing? Are you kidding? I was the laziest kid. I never had to drag me to practice.
Even as an adult, as a professional, you didn't practice?
Yeah, much. Never. But going to the Chicago Conservatory as a child. That helped me. And of course, Interlochen was a wonderful thing for me, going 5 summers to Interlochen, because I got to play with, the orchestras and the bands. One of my first jobs was the Coconut Grove Orchestra. That's one of the very first jobs I got when I moved out here.
Right.
And the piano player who was playing intermission, Eddie Bergman was the band leader at that time, and he fired the piano player who was always drunk. And the piano player is the only guy that ever hit me. He slapped me and he said, "Taking away my job." Anyway, so that's the only time. But so I became the piano player with the orchestra, and then then I started playing harp with the orchestra. And then Eddie Bergman said, "Oh, wait a minute, you play the flute too?" And then he put me playing flute on the Latin numbers. Anyway, so that was about my first job. Was
Wow.
to play.
So you're just an incredibly differentiated musician. You can go in many different directions at the same time.
Well, I can play a lot of different styles, yeah.
And all this with very limited training, yeah?
Right, training, training was just, as a child, I started playing and I've always played. That was it.
That's fascinating to me. I just find that fascinating. All right, so when you're thinking in your career, as you're thinking, okay, I'm going to record an album, or I'm going to do something, I'm going to go out on the road or something like that and play in a club, do you do your own arrangements?
Yeah, what arrangements? Arrangements. If I'm going to go on the road with Tony Bennett or Liberace. Incidentally, we haven't even discussed Liberace.
Sure.
Who I was with for several years. The sweetest, kindest, most wonderful man. And he and I both like to cook. So when we traveled, he sometimes carried a little electric stove and we'd cook. And anyway, but arrangements, but we don't need arrangements unless we're going to do something with a huge orchestra. But just to go in, I didn't need arrangements. If a singer says to me, "Hey, I want to do this song in B flat." Oh, that's the other thing. I can play in any key. Wow. Which is a big help to getting a job. Yes, I can play in any key. So that has been a tremendous help to always working.
You do recognize that what you're describing is very rare.
Well, yeah, I don't know everybody that can play in every key. I know that I was doing a show years ago in New York, some radio show with some singer. And I said to the piano player, bring it, let's do it in the key of A. He said, "Are you kidding? What do you mean the key of A? We'll do it in B flat, kid. That's it." So no, it is a very wonderful thing that I was able to play. I still am. Somebody says, "You want to play this in F sharp or G flat?" I said, "Okay."
That's extraordinary. It really is.
Yeah.
Right, so do you think, as you're going to play, do you think about the audience at all, about how they're going to receive it, or are you playing to please you?
Well, no, I want to please them. Sure.
So you think about the audience then. Some artists don't consider the audience. They're just doing something that works for them.
Oh, no, I want, when I'm playing with Sinatra or Barbra Streisand or Tony Bennett, sure, I wanted to play something that the audience was going to say, "Yeah, that was great. I loved that." Sure, I want to please people.
All right.
Just I want to please my husband of 51 years.
Well, that's an important one. If you're trying to please your husband, that's really important, because then you have some goal.
He supposedly married me for my chords and my cooking. And unfortunately, for the last 3 years also, I've been so busy, I haven't been cooking. I confess that.
I'm going to ask you a question I ask a lot of artists, and it's not necessarily the easiest question, but you may have a good answer. Are you able to identify for you what makes a good piece of music good? Why is something good versus it's not great?
No, but it has to do with the chords, I guess, the proper chords. No, I couldn't tell you what makes a piece of music great. You
just recognize something is good when you hear it.
Like the man that just died, Sondheim and the people that he's worked with, those were all, a lot of them, great songs.
That is for sure. Sondheim is my personal hero. And that's something that you aspire to that, but good luck, because he's a one-off. He's a unique character.
Right.
So are you, over the years, did you do anything to keep yourself physically in shape to play, like work with your arms or exercise or anything like that?
No, I'm a very lazy person
Mm.
and I'm not very athletic. And we've always lived somewhere with a beautiful pool, like in the house we're in now. I have not swam in 3 years. Incidentally, I'm also wearing today an Italian necklace. You know, I've lived in Italy a lot. And I taught my husband to speak Italian, which he speaks beautifully. And we had a beautiful apartment in Italy that we lived in. And
Well, how did you learn to speak Italian?
because my first husband, I guess, was had an Italian company, a terrible man, very selfish, snob, English. And I lasted with him about 3 years. And I guess when I traveled with him throughout Europe, and especially in Italy, he had factories in Italy, and I guess that's when I learned Italian. And so, you know, and then I taught Mike to speak Italian, and we've lived in Italy. We've had several beautiful apartments in Italy, which we sold. And that's it.
So for young musicians who are thinking about doing what you've done, what would you say are the common mistakes that they should avoid?
It isn't mistakes, it's they all ask the same questions of me and of Mike. I love it when they all say to Mike, how can I start in? I'm a songwriter. Well, I mean, what is he going to take all their songs? And I mean, he's trying to get, you know, artists to do his songs. What
Sure.
he's going to. So, and the same thing, they all call me and say, how did you get started in the music business? Well, I mean, what should I say? I played since the time I was 5 years old, and my first job was, you know, in a hotel with the orchestra, and I just always knew somehow what to do. I can't tell them, oh, here's my favorite, Leonard Feather, you know, who was the great jazz,
Sure.
just wrote an article in the last few years in which he said there were only 2 great jazz harpists ever, Dorothy Ashby and Corky Hale.
Wow.
So
I have to ask you, did you know Harpo?
that's a great story. I forgot to put that down. Yeah, when I came out here, somebody took me to the harp store where they sold harps and strings and everything. And they said, wow, we want Harpo to hear you, my God. So they took me to meet Harpo, and he said, young lady, he heard me play a song, and he said, young lady, I'm gonna make you a star. And I said, oh, Mr. Marks, I don't want to do that. I just would like to play with a big orchestra like Rose, like, you know. And he said, you are a most ungrateful young lady. And I never saw.
Oh my goodness. He's also a hero of mine, but you know, obviously I never met him. Harpo.
Well, let's not talk about his playing.
Okay. Well, he
No,
played different.
here's the thing that I make a joke about, because everywhere that I go, like to tea rooms and clubs and everything, and somebody introduces me, and the harpist who's playing there says, oh, Corky Hale, oh, you're so wonderful. You know, I'm a jazz harpist too, at which point they immediately play Raindrops Are Falling on My Head, because harpists grow up playing only Debussy and what have you. So they think if they play you know, anything that's not classical, they consider themselves a jazz harpist. So every harpist that I meet everywhere always says to me, oh, I'm a jazz harpist too. So
What would you
anyway.
say that you've learned over the years about playing music that you wish you had known early on? Was there anything that you've learned over time?
No, I can't really think anything. I've been very lucky. I've played with, you know, wonderful bands and wonderful musicians and everything. And it's hard for me to say that, you know, which means I'm very lucky.
You certainly are. We've definitely talked about that, and you definitely are very lucky. So, all right, I want to talk for a moment about road work or performance out of your own comfort zone or not at home. Is there any kind of thought or advice that you can give to people about what life is like on the road and how to handle that?
No, and of course I haven't done that for a number of years. I don't do that anymore.
Right.
But on the road, I mean, it depends on who you're working with. Like I was lucky, as I said, with Liberace, who was wonderful on the road. You know, he he brought a little oven and we even cooked. But most of the people that I've worked with, you know, I've been, once again, very lucky. And when we toured on the road at various cities, the people were wonderful to us. Oh, New Orleans, for example, Diamond Jim threw a huge party for us in New Orleans, which was, you know, wonderful. But mostly being on the road, when we would play somewhere, they would have a nice party for us or whatever.
Wonderful. So what would you say in live performance are the biggest challenges that you face?
Live
Performance in front of an
well,
audience. What are the challenges?
well, again, to know what you're doing. I mean, don't get up on the stage and think that you're going to play songs with guys and, in B flat, and then know that, that's one of the keys I don't do too well. And no, but I mean, it's hard to say.
Is it, you certainly must have gone through rehearsals most of the time, or did you just fly at it?
Well, I mean, not always have we had a chance to rehearse. It also depends if we were going to rehearse with just a new bass player and a drummer, or we were going to go in with a big group or whatever. But no, mostly had a chance to do a little rehearsing.
And that way, when you're hitting the stage, it's not, people know what they're doing with each other.
Exactly. It's not a shock.
It's not a shock, is correct. Did you have any particular pre-show ritual before performance? Was there something that you did?
No. I didn't do a prayer session or anything that I would play the right chords.
Right. So you didn't have any warm-up routine or anything like that?
No. Sounds very boring.
No, what it sounds is that you're gifted beyond words. That's what it sounds like.
I pretty much knew what I was doing. I must say that.
Yeah. Did you need to dig into your own life to find inspiration to play, or did it just come out of you?
No, depending on what singer that I'm working with, that was the inspiration. I mean, if you're going to play for Barbra Streisand, boy, that's enough of an inspiration ever, or with Billie Holiday. Tony Bennett, to play with guys like Tony, who was so wonderful. And that's it.
And among all of your work, do you have something that's your favorite, something that you really love?
Playing? No, I really loved playing with all the various people that I played with.
Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing from live performing that you've learned that you thought worked really, really well that you always repeated? No,
I'm sorry, I'm so boring. I don't.
You're not boring. I'm asking you all the questions, but the thing is that that's your talent is so massive that
no, well, I don't know how massive my talent is. I'm lucky. Yeah, I'm lucky, for example, by the fact that I can play in every key, and that I have a tendency to rush. I hope that I always get hooked up with a good drummer and a good bass player.
Do you enjoy performing live? When you're performing live, do you enjoy it?
Well, I haven't been doing it for
I understand.
several years ago. I mean, Catalina is the premier jazz club here now, and they've been after me to please come back. So I incidentally, here's another lucky thing. I'm the stepmother of 3,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 guys and the girl. She has just turned out, she just got her medical, she's now a doctor, but she's a tremendous singer too. Trisha Tahara is my daughter-in-law. And she was singing in New York with a wonderful jazz piano player. Anyway, she and I went, we do an act called The Two Mrs. Stolers. And we performed again several months ago at Catalina.
The Two Mrs. Stolers.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful. Anyway.
So if you could go back in time,
yeah,
and do something over again to make it more to your satisfaction or better in some way, is there anything you would?
Yeah, I'd rehearse with her and do a really top-notch act. Several years ago, we did it for the first time at the Wallace in Beverly Hills.
Right.
And it was tremendous. There were lines for the tickets. I mean, we were a huge success. Well, but now I'm so busy with the housing program that I have not really been rehearsing with her at all. And she has since gotten her doctor's license. She actually came to the house and gave us all our booster shots. I mean, talk about lucky. And she's wonderful. I mean, I have the 2 greatest daughter-in-laws ever. There's another lucky thing. I hear women say, oh, I don't like my daughter-in-law at all. And I have 2 of the greatest daughter-in-laws. So once again, what can I say?
You got the lucky end of the stick when you drew.
Yeah, but I think, I work on it. My husband and I do a lot of, we give away a lot. We work a lot with poor people, and we are out there. We have several things. We have one thing called Mankind, and we've hired a guy, and he goes out to the people living in those tents, and he takes bags of food and toys for the children and everything. We try to give back. How lucky we are.
Well, that, like I say, we need more of you out there. That's for sure.
I think so. Yeah, we get a lot of lovely.
Well, indeed. So I'm speaking with the extraordinary Corky Hale, who's had a life unlike pretty much anybody's. And
That's true.
it is true. It's been a unique and very interesting and unusual life, and yet very, I assume, fulfilling. I assume you're fulfilled by what you've done.
Would they like to go out and buy the book called Corky Hale Uncorked? I think it now on sale for $25.
There you go.
It's a nice story.
In all of your experiences, you've already told us a couple of funny stories. Do you have a story that you can relate to us that was either weird, quirky, strange, or just plain funny?
One of the funniest things is there was a picture, I traveled with Liberace,
right?
But the New York Post came out one time with the picture of us on the front page, and it said, "Will these two wed?" Which everybody loved. That was number one. What was the other one? Oh, when I was dating Mike Stoller, he said, "Honey, I would like you to meet Elvis Presley." And I said, "Wow, are you kidding?" So he took me to meet Elvis, and all the women I knew were very jealous. And Elvis took my hand and he said, "Oh, you're married to a wonderful man, miss." And he said, "You are a lovely woman, and very happy to meet you." And I thought, wow, there were about 1 million women that would like to trade places with me at that time.
I think 1 million is a small number. There's like tens of millions.
Those were two things that I remember. A lot of funny things happened, but those were two that remain in my memory.
Well, and obviously you've not only met, but worked with some gigantically famous people. Yeah,
I have. Yeah, it's been great. My husband and I are very big in the civil rights number. They even built these in Montgomery, Alabama, because we've done a lot for the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've done a lot with them, and they built a theater there, and they've named it the Mike and Corky Hale Stoller Theater for Civil Rights. We're very proud of that. That's in Montgomery.
And so last question for you today, Corky. Do you have a solid piece of advice or tip for those who are trying to either break in or make their way to the next level in the business to help them along, the way that you could think about a career?
They ask all the time, how did you break in? How did you get this? And how did you get to the recording and all that? And if you're lucky, you can meet the right people to go to work for them. That would help. Like my first job, playing at the Coconut Grove and meeting this guy called up and he said, "I heard you singing on the radio from the Coconut Grove. Would you come to Vegas and work with my band?" And his name was Jerry Gray. So I said, "Wow, yeah." So I went to Las Vegas, and this was the first day. And he said, "They've just booked somebody on tonight's show," and in walked Billie Holiday. Now she looked over at this little blonde sitting at the piano and she said, "Who's a piano player here?" And I thought, oh my God. Anyway, she threw her music on the piano, and it was like a movie. We played one song and she said, "You is my little girl." And that's how I started, and then when you play for somebody famous, other people want to hire you. And so, as I said, I've been very lucky.
So the link in the chain is getting that first, hopefully great gig.
Pretty much so. Yeah, Try and affix yourself to somewhat of a star, and try and get a name for yourself as playing, this and that, and that you can play this and and transpose in quickly and so forth. And that's it. Just be ready.
Well, Corky Hale, this has just been a fantastic, just shy of an hour on StoryBeat today. And I'm so grateful to you for spending a little time with me.
Yeah, but you are a wonderful interviewer. I have been on shows with somebody that doesn't know anything, and you are a wonderful interviewer, Steve.
You're very, very kind.
I don't know how kind I am, but I'm truthful.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And I hope that you have a great day and you keep up the great work with all of the people you're trying to help out there in the world.
Okay, Steve, I will. And my husband too.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.